What is up, everybody? It's your boy Verdict here, and thank you so much for stopping by. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have a very cool story for you, and that is, well, pretty much the lore of the Dark Knight in our beloved BDO. So we're going to tackle a lot of things today. We're going to tackle what is the Dark Knight in its entirety, how did they came up to their notoriety as they are in the current times, how did they even come to originate into our world, and I will go a little bit back in time for this. But before we get into this video, if you like what you see, if you like those lore series, I have an incredible playlist which is actually very big right now. It's almost 7 hours long of me speaking in your ear about BDO lore, and it goes grim, it goes crazy, and it's absolutely amazing. It's one of my favorite bits of lore throughout the entirety of lore. So let's really go back, like and subscribe if I have earned this by the end of the video, and we gotta talk about probably 3,000-4,000 years ago. Mother Sylvia, of course, the goddess of all elf kind, as she descends from the so-called heavens, or what we call is Elvia. She brings forth the two daughters, the Ganel of the sun and the Vidir of the moon, the most important split in children from the get-go, as the Mother Sylvia, the goddess, the maternal figure of the entirety of elfkind. The law itself dictates the two children to be born. From the Camasylvian tree is where the entirety of elfkind gets powers. The Camasylv is what they call it, is the fountain of the elven power. Mother Sylvia fell down from the heavens with her entourage, let's just call it as such, the Camasylvian spirits known as Okiara, Krogdalu, Voltara, Nark. At this particular time, the elves are enjoying a plentiful and a bountiful life. See, it's very simple. Sylvia has an important job, which I talk about in the Elven lore video, but she ascends backwards into the heavens, leaving the Vidir and the Ganel to basically whatever happens to them, but she bestows the Camasylvian tree as a gift of power for them to use as they understand the world in which they live. So it's very important here to note that they grew exceptionally lenient. They didn't care much of anything. You need to understand that elves, in fact of the matter, are not necessarily perpetual, but you could call them eternal for all we know, because we have never seen, we ourselves, an elf die of natural causes or an old age, let's just say it like this. See, elves are very ancient. They have prolonged lifespan. Think of it like this. We know of only one elf in particular, the Luthragon Elder, who is a part of Sylvia's entourage, that is of age, and he seems very old. If we have to guess how old an elf is, considering their youth currently, you could say that they're probably in, according to human years, something like in their 20s plus minus, depending on the queens of both sides, because they might be a little bit older than this. So we have to move onward into this very interesting setting. The elves enjoyed plentiful bounties, feasts of all kinds, and of course, as you would expect, a calamity. Of course, this is Black Desert. When you think everything is going according to plan, the lore has always told us it always gets dark, and the so-called dark spirits by the elves engage in a very furious combat with them, and one thing became very well known. The elves have absolutely no martial capacity, spoiled children that pretty much lacked all capability of defending their homeland of Camasylvia. And the tree at this particular time, the gift of their mother Sylvia, had to protect them. And in a very big effort, it expelled in its entire light, causing an incredible explosion. We're talking an explosion that was felt by the ancients of our world from across the entirety of the continent. In this particular time, we see the difference of the Vidir and the Ganel. You see how both of them reacted to this entire situation differently depending on their natures, one of them being of the sun, the other being of the moon, one of them preferring the light over darkness, the other one preferring darkness over light. Those two tropes are engraved into the fabrics of reality, and their motifs beliefs, you could say, as people. The Vidir understood a very important and fundamental thing in Black Desert, and that is that darkness has always been here and it will always be here, and the only way where you do not conflict with it is to play around it. See, while the Ganel, they were creating those weapons, the Vidir, and a portion of those Vidir known as Ahibs, or in other words known as futurely the Burning Ones, they would proceed to do something heretical. Instead of taking those branches, the trunks, the roots, everything that basically is happening with the Kamasuf tree for them to create weapons, they would start burning them. A very important conflict occurred, and this conflict was all about what to do with the leftover trees. While the Ganel, in fact, they wanted this tree to continue living because it was the last gift of their mother before she ascended into the heavens. Another thing from the Vidir was happening. The Ahibs from that particular sector wanted the tree dead because it invited the darkness into this world. They understood that the core fundament of the world is darkness, and if you try to be different from it, then the entirety of the, let's just call it in a very funny way, the immune system of the world, or fact of the matter, the cosmos, is going to come after you. And they wanted survival in hiding into the darkness or tapping into it as well. So the Vidir, known as the Ahibs now, and a very small portion of those Ahibs, they had a major conflict and a civil war. The Ahibs had to be kicked out of Camasylvia, and they ended up into the land created by one of the Camasylvian spirits known as Nark, the arid land where a kingdom already bloomed, and in the future it already was brought atop ruin, and that is the ancient kingdom of Orzeka. The ancient kingdom of Orzeka, the most horrific bits. I have so many videos on it. I will not even mention it this time because I'm starting to repeat myself a little bit here. But the ancient kingdom of Orzeka was a horrid, horrid place, and the darkness of that kingdom was so deep engraved into the fabrics of the zone, of the territory, to the point where nothing bloomed there without it being corrupted by what happened in ancient times with that particular kingdom. But see, now we have to mention for the first time the Dark Knight. See, the Dark Knights, they are neither with the Ganel. In fact, they were at the very start of the Black Spirit issue, they sided with the Ganel. A very good parts of the Vidir actually sided with the Ganel. But then, upon understanding the Black Spirits, this conflict would kind of completely separate the Vidir and the Ganel entirely, for them to not mix at all. Their cultures would be just so different. And the Dark Knights are actually currently the last and what is left over of the original Vidir mythos, let's just say it as such, because the Ahibs, they are entirely with a different mindset. They do consider them as Vidir, and they often enough, some NPCs would call themselves Vidir, but fact of the matter is that the true Vidir are the Dark Knights. So you understand right now at least the upbringing of the Dark Knights, how did they come up to be, and what would happen in Camasylvia would be the Ganel would split into two factions working together. There was no conflict there, known as the Acker and the Rangers, while the Ahibs would go into Ahibs and Dark Knights, which stem from Vidir as well. So let's talk really about the Dark Knight. What is your character? Your character is a Black Spirit inviting one. Let's just say it as such. See, the Dark Knights, upon meddling with the Black Spirits, understood how much power this could bring. Upon their departure from the old lands of Camasylvia, they promised the spirits of the land, which was a part of Sylvia's entourage, to protect Camasylvia at all cost, and they keep this vow with them till this day. It is one of their mottos. The Dark Knights will be here to protect Camasylvia from anybody. That is very important. The Vidir Dark Knights, they think of themselves as above the Ganel and the Ahibs. So it's important to think that they factually believe, because of the deal which they struck, or not the deal, the promise which they made, the vow which they made with the spirits, that they know better than all of them. They're here to exchange with other races. They're here to exchange with other people, basically the entirety of it. And we followed those footsteps of one of the most important Dark Knights in the history known as Ataraxia, of course, the main character which we follow throughout the Odilita Part 1 and Part 2. It is important to mention this character here because her story is gruesome and completely undeserved, with an ending that just simply makes you cry. But fact of the matter is that this is a story for another time. We have to really talk about how the Dark Knights got their power. The power of the Dark Knights entirely comes from the Black Spirit. It reminisces upon it because they are in communication with the Black Spirit. All Dark Knights have one with them, while the Ganel and the Ahibs most often do not. In fact, they never do have a Black Spirit. So the Dark Knight really differentiate from both of her sisters like this. And a very important thing to mention is that fact of the matter is that it is a very gruesome deal to have to invite you yourself onto your being. Not for the Black Spirit to infest you and now you have to deal with it. No, they invite the Black Spirit in. They describe it in a piece of a knowledge as a fountain of bottomless power. But when you peer into the abyss, it peers back at you. So a very important bit here is to understand that most of the Dark Knights meet a gruesome fate because of this invitation. So the nature of the Dark Knight is to adopt the power of the Black Spirit. But Dark Knights in time, they would essentially start being not really brainwashed, but they would lose themselves to the Black Spirit. They would lose their memories. They would lose everything that they would be essentially as from the past times. They would forget what their calling was, and they would end up being simply Dark Knights. Most of the times, the Dark Knights which lose themselves completely to the Black Spirit are known as Fallen Ones. This is a very important thing. You know of the Fallen Ones from Crypt of Resting Thoughts, the Dark Knights there, etc. You could pretty much say that those are the ones who have lost themselves entirely. See, there is also another type of a Fallen One Dark Knight, and that is a Dark Knight which introduces too much darkness to them. Now, let me explain this in a little bit. See, the Dark Knights are very known for being greedy, and the Black Spirit plays into the desire of more power. It plays into greed. It is literally the manifestation of greed. And upon the arrival in Odilita, the Turasil tree, which was created post the entirety of the Elven conflict so that the Ahibs would have a tree of their own, a fountain of power, known as the Turasil tree. That Turasil tree had an ancient, what is described a curse. Fact of the matter is that it draws from the powers of the ancient kingdom of Orzeka, what is left on into the soils and the fabrics of the land. So this is in fact Zarka's corruption from the ancient time of Orzeka. And what happens was the darkness which is being withdrawn from these Dark Knights for the sakes of more power to keep up with their sisters, that darkness made them turn into the burning Ahibs, or you could call them not necessarily the burning Ahibs, but the Fallen Ones. So this is the other type of Fallen One. Fact of the matter is, a Dark Knight which failed to master its Black Spirit is known as a Fallen Dark Knight. It doesn't matter which and what causes it. If you do not control your Black Spirit, you are a Fallen One. Since I mentioned there are Fallen One, what are the ones which are not fallen? What about these Dark Knights which have communed with their Black Spirits and created pretty much a connection similar to us? Well, those are pretty much known as the modern Dark Knights, the powerful Dark Knights, the ones which conquer their own fates. It is very important to know this. See, this particular method of conquering yourself goes into self-exploration amidst the peak of your power. At one point, we know this from the BDO lore, at one point the Black Spirit will challenge you, and it will challenge you when it knows that it is stronger than you to beat you. And this is why the Black Spirits are always so prominent. See, fact of the matter is, the Dark Knights, they do not allow for this to happen. They challenge their inner darkness, which is the Black Spirit part of you. And in reality, a thing occurs where the Dark Knights invoke the rights upon the Black Spirit after a self-defeat, which is an entire inner turmoil within the Dark Knights. The Dark Knights who would counter the Black Spirit's pretty much corruption, let's just say it, of the soul, of the manifestation of greed, would receive the weapon known as the Vediant, and that weapon would even furthermore emphasize their strengths and their connection with the Black Spirit. See, it would be still a bottomless power, but you could still get lost into how much power you actually wield. You could say that Dark Knights are kind of, you know that statement known as lore accurate? Basically, it's synonymous with being exceptionally powerful. So a very important thing now that we have to mention. The Vediant is essentially a key. It is a weapon which channels all of your might and power in a concentrated point. You could see the awakening Dark Knights as Dark Knights which have succeeded the transformation. In modern times, the Dark Knights are still the defenders of Camasylvia. Their leader is one of very, very huge notoriety. You can even go ahead and talk to her. She is absolutely very cool. Ataraxia, unfortunately, throughout the Odalita quest chain, we know that she's no longer with us, and she was one of the founders of this entire movement. In modern times, the Dark Knights are looking forward to enhance their knowledge about the world still, and whenever a Dark Knight is being spotted, there is this kind of, you wouldn't necessarily call it as fear, but there's this caution from people because they know how powerful and strong the Dark Knights actually are, opposed to what the Ganel currently are and the Ahibs are as well. The Dark Knights are just on a whole new level. They're completely uncorruptible, determined for them to keep on going into the pursuit of saving not just Camasylvia, but to save the entirety of our world. This is their motivation. We have become strong enough to fend off of the second coming of the darkness, which is Doom. So now you know your lore of your class Dark Knight, how it came to be, the very hard decisions, the strong sacrifices which they had to make in order for them to be powerful to withstand the new coming darkness. And I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share those videos with all of your folks who are interested in lore. The playlist, make sure you check it, and of course support the channel monetarily if you feel like it deserves it. With that being said, I love you to death, and I'll see you in, well, the other day with another video. See you guys. Enjoy. Bye bye.